Welcome back to Mission Debrief, Temporal Archive, where I'm rewatching every episode of Strange New Worlds one at a time. It's part deep dive, part love letter, and part reality check, because even when I'm enjoying the ride, I'm still going to call out what isn't working. Today's entry is episode 4, Memento Mori, a tense, tightly paced story that delivers on action and characters, while also making some bold choices that stirred up more than a few opinions. Now this episode starts strong, really strong. Right out of the gate, we get a new addition to Star Trek canon, Starfleet Remembrance Day, a quiet but meaningful tradition where officers wear the badges of fallen comrades. It's perfect framing device for this episode and for La'an in particular. She's not wearing one, and Una notices. Picking up on their connection from the last episode, we immediately dive into this almost sisterly dynamic between them. Una tries to nudge La'an toward healing, very gently but persistently, but of course, La'an pushes back. The tension between them isn't dramatic or hostile, it's personal. There's care there, there's history, and their little verbal sparring match has a familiar edge that feels earned. It's a strong character moment that works beautifully. Honestly, moments like this remind me what Strange New Worlds does the best. It's the cast. The greatest asset this show has is its ensemble. Every one of these actors brings something distinctive to the table, and it shows, especially in emotionally layered scenes like this one. They're not just performing, they're building something that feels lived in. But now we get to the hard part. On first watch, I was locked in. Well, until the Gorn showed up. Or more specifically, until the show doubled down on portraying them as full-on space monsters. That shift yanked me right out of the story. On rewatch, it's even worse. Because now I know where they are going, and there's no path that connects this depiction to what we see in Arena. It's not just a canon tweak. It's a full rewrite of what the Gorn represents. And look, while I said before that I'm open to updates, even to canon being bent for the sake of storytelling, this wasn't that. This wasn't smart retconning. This was a choice that actively undermines one of Trek's most iconic moral narratives. What made Arena powerful wasn't the lizard suit, it was the mercy. The idea that even when you're justified in using violence, you don't have to. That the enemy might not be evil, just misunderstood. You can't get from that story to this one. Not with these Gorn, and that's the problem. For longtime fans like me, it's kind of a deal breaker. For new viewers, probably not. I can recognize that from the outside. Everything else is working. Writing, direction, suspense, pacing. It's really tight and technically excellent. But emotionally, I'm out. That one creative decision has kept me from fully investing in the show. That's a real shame, because everything else in this episode suggests it could have been something truly special. Okay, now let's start at the beginning. So, the Enterprise arrives at Penimbus 3 to deliver some supplies to a remote colony. But something is clearly wrong. The communication satellite has been destroyed, and they can't get a signal through. Captain Pike gives the order to investigate, but reminds everyone not to jump to conclusions. It's a very small moment, but a strong one. This line is classic Pike, measured, grounded, always open to context before panic. The away team beams down. La'an and Una are, of course, included. And they find no bodies, just blood. A lot of it. Meanwhile, in orbit, the Enterprise locates the civilian war freighter filled with wounded colonists. Beaming them aboard isn't possible due to ships or shielding, so the crew has to physically extend a docking corridor to bring them over. Back on the Enterprise, La'an speaks with a young girl rescued from the colony who mentions monsters. That word and the clicking sound that the girl makes hit La'an hard. She recognizes the truth and immediately warns the captain. The captain is already in danger. It's a trap. The colonists were used as a bait, and with the docking corridor extended, the Enterprise cannot raise shields in time. That's when the Gorn strike. What follows is a tense, escalating cat and mouse sequence. La'an describes the Gorn as monsters, but not supernatural ones, just ruthless, relentless predators who hunt with brutal precision. As the crew scrambles to survive, Pike relies heavily on La'an's traumatic knowledge of their tactics. And when Una is seriously injured in the first wave of attacks, there's a kind of a blink and you'll miss it moment from La'an, just a flicker of the scared child inside her peeking through. Christina Chang delivers that emotion with stunning restraint. Meanwhile, we're introduced to a new pairing, Uhura and Hammer, as she rotates through engineering during her cadet assignment. It's a brilliant setup for their dynamic. When the ship is hit, we learn, almost casually, that both sick bay and the main cargo bay have taken damage. That's bad news on both fronts. Medical is compromised, and Hammer and Uhura are now trapped in a failing section of the ship. That subplot brings some of the episode's most heartfelt moments. Hammer's guarded wisdom, Uhura's adaptability and growth, it all just works. Their bond adds emotional grounding amid all the chaos. The episode builds tension masterfully. Each time the crew pulls off a small win, they learn it wasn't enough. The Gorn keep coming. We get a sense of their cold strategy, and eventually, it's La'an's memories that help them crack the Gorn's coded, light-based communication system. The final play involves a slingshot maneuver around the black hole, because of course it does. A bold move that underscores Pike's mix of strategy and optimism. But even in victory, the cost is high, and the Gorn threat looms larger than ever. Now, let's talk first with what this episode actually nails. We're talking about pacing, tone, and character tension. Director Dan Liu creates a high-stakes atmosphere that doesn't let up. It's a pressure cooker, and the horror beats land without feeling overdone. The tone is sharp and focused, and it leans into character-driven moments without losing momentum. Christina Chang delivers another standout performance as La'an. Her trauma is never played for cheap effect. It's actually baked into her instincts, her body language, her choices. That split-second moment when she sees Una hurt and the younger, more vulnerable part of her breaks through, it's subtle and devastating. One of the best emotional beats in the episode. The Uhura and Hammer pairing adds just the right amount of heart to balance the tension. They play off each other beautifully. Hammer's gruff confidence against Uhura's curiosity and emerging courage. It's one of the smartest character pairings the show's done so far, and it gives us a deeper look at both of them. Now, let's talk about how the crew actually defeats the Gorn. It's not brute force. It's actually ingenuity, resourcefulness, and a little bit of classic Trek cleverness. That maneuver using the black hole's gravity to slip past the Gorn, it's bold, yes, but it taps into a long Trek tradition. We've seen slingshot physics used for time travel in the original series and Star Trek 4, and for tactical escapes in episodes like TNG's Booby Trap and Voyager's Scientific Method. It's a familiar move, but it always feels satisfying because it reminds us that brains can beat the brawn. That's what Trek does best. Now, expanding on the Gorn issue, because yes, I keep bringing it up and I'm going to keep bringing it up. This isn't nitpicking, it's a real foundational problem for longtime fans like me. The decision to make the Gorn into pure horror antagonists wasn't just a stylistic shift. It was a choice that ignored the broader narrative of Star Trek storytelling. And what's frustrating is how avoidable it was. The franchise has a rich history of using related species to explore different paths of development. Vulcans and Romulans are the obvious example. There was absolutely a version of this story where you could introduce a more savage, isolated offshoot of the Gorn, something that went rogue or evolved under harsher conditions. You could have had your intense horror, your monster, and still respected the canon. But instead, the show went with the legacy name and threw out the legacy meaning. I get it. Sometimes you have a cool idea, Gorn but scary, and you run with it. But that's the problem. No one seemed to stop and ask, what happens 5 steps from now? How do you get from this depiction to Arena? How do you reconcile compassion and communication with this? The writers got enamored with the idea and they didn't reverse engineer it. They didn't ask the hard continuity questions. And it shows. And because they're doubling down on the version of the Gorn, I'm going to keep pointing out how much it doesn't work. Not just for the canon, but for what Star Trek fundamentally stands for. Now, that said, Ortegas continues to be MVP of snark. You know, she's dropping the perfect deadpan line, something along the lines, so we're going full impulse into the giant death cloud without missing a beat. And Pike's leadership ethos is on full display throughout. He listens, he adapts, he delegates, and most importantly, he cares. The look on his face when he hears Uhura's voice over comms says everything. That's a captain who leads with compassion, not control. And that's why his ship keeps pulling off miracles. So, all in all, Memento Mori is a great episode, but it plays a risky game with Star Trek Legacy. On its own, the episode succeeds. It's tense, emotional, and packed with sharp character work. But once you slot it into a larger Trek timeline, things start to wobble. The execution here is top tier. The ship-to-ship tactics are inventive. The themes of memory, trauma, and survival are woven into seamlessly. Performances across the board are stellar. There's a lot to admire. So much, in fact, that the frustration doesn't come from failure, it comes from potential. Because in the essence, this is the bigger challenge when you're working with the legacy IP. And look, I'm not just talking about Star Trek. That applies to, Star Wars, Doctor Who, to any universe with decades of lore behind it. On one hand, you're being handed a dream project, a sandbox filled with beloved characters, built-in audiences, and global recognition. I think it's every writer's fantasy. Tell your story and millions of people will show up on day one. But the dream comes with strings. You don't just get the fanbase, you also inherit responsibility. And too often, when creators get excited about reinventing something, they skip a step. They forgot to trace the path from what's already been established to where they want to go. That's what happened here. The Gorn decision isn't frustrating because it's malicious or lazy. It's frustrating because it feels rushed. Like no one sat down and asked the hard follow-through questions. And that's baffling because the Strange New Worlds team is clearly talented. The writing, the directing, the storytelling, so much of it is genuinely excellent. That's what makes this kind of a slip-up even harder to take. This isn't an amateur hour. This is a room full of smart people making a very preventable mistake. And it didn't have to be this way. The talent is there, the ideas are strong, but if you're going to take bold swings with legacy material, the responsibility is to think 5 steps ahead. Especially when the property you're working on is built on the idea of thoughtful, moral storytelling. So, if this episode proves anything, it's that Strange New Worlds can play in multiple tonal sandboxes. But sometimes, even a beautifully crafted hour of television leaves you with one sharp pebble in your boot. The Gorn shift doesn't ruin the episode, but it complicates the legacy. We've traded one kind of metaphor for another, and in doing so, we lost a little of what made the original encounter resonate. So, here's the confession. I found a way to enjoy this episode. I made up my own headcanon. These aren't the Gorn. They are the Thorn. The thorn in my side. In my version, they're just a violent offshoot. Nothing to do with the Gorn we met in Arena. And when I frame it that way, I can actually enjoy the ride. The problem is, I shouldn't have to. There are people getting paid a lot of money to figure this stuff out. So yeah, it's fun until I remember I had to fix it myself. And that's a wrap on Memento Mori. Let me know what you thought. Did the horror shift land for you? Or are you like me, still wishing they left the Gorn's legacy intact? So I'll be back soon with the next episode in my Strange New Worlds rewatch. Until then, feel free to share, subscribe, or send this along to someone else who's navigating their own Trek feels. Until the next time, live long and prosper.